Ladies and gentlemen, what an honor and a privilege it is for me to introduce you here to this esteemed team that has, in that sense, democratized entrepreneurship in India. I've had the privilege and the pleasure of interviewing each and every one of them individually over the past 16 years that I've been at CNBC TV18, and I have to say that Mr. Murthy has been a personal mentor. I've enjoyed my conversations immensely with Nandan. When Nandan did his book, we did a special series on CNBC TV18 with Kris Gopalakrishnan in his latest venture with Itihas. CNBC TV18 has been proud to sort of take that story forward with Shibu and the entrepreneurial venture, including his own daughter's entrepreneurial venture, which was featured on Young Turks several years ago with Mr. Raghavan and Mr. Dinesh. Thank you so much. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to have you all here with us today. So, Mr. Murthy, let me start by asking you, and I'm going to get all of you to go back in time a little bit and then talk about the future as well. But let me ask you to go back in time, Mr. Murthy. There was a very telling comment there in that audiovisual that we played out. And you said there that if you had to do it all over again, you would do it with exactly the same cast of characters. And Nandan said pretty much the same thing. He said the beauty of Infosys has been the fact that it's been built by a team that was okay with growing old together. How did you manage this chemistry? Because this is something that a lot of young entrepreneurs here would like to understand. A lot of startups fail, not because the business is bad or the product is bad, but because the entrepreneurs fall out. The founders don't see eye to eye. They don't agree with each other. And I know that Infosys has been one of the biggest debating societies, so it's not as if all of you agreed on everything. But what was the secret sauce that kept you all together?
You know, we were all working together in Mumbai at Patni Computer Systems Limited. I was very fortunate to put together a very high quality team. There are probably about 100 very smart youngsters. And by then I had understood that there are three basic ingredients for running the entrepreneurial marathon. One, you need competence. Second, you need commitment. And third, you need character, a value system. And while I was working with all these people, I was able to realize that all these people had the three ingredients that we were looking for, that I was looking for. And that's how we all came together.
Okay, Nandan, let me take that forward. Again, in that audiovisual, in that interview that we did, I think that interview was done in 2002 or 2003, if I remember correctly. And you said that a lot of companies started up around the same time that Infosys did, but not all of them have either had the kind of success that you've had, not all of them exist today. What was it about the Infosys story that not just democratized entrepreneurship, but has been able to be sustainable, profitable, and see over 3 decades of growth?
No, I think, as Murthy said, we were all had a common vision, common set of values. We all had middle-class values. We had the same sense of deferred gratification, that we were willing to postpone benefits for a decade before we actually saw the benefits. And I think we also brought complementary skills. Everybody had different skills, and the skills when they came together was a great combination. Everybody was very good at work. I was good at the BS part of it. So that was my contribution. So I think the fact that we had this extraordinary team together, and I think because of the leadership of Murthy and the inspiration that he gave us, we always put the company before any of us. So the company was larger than any of us. So when there was a disagreement, finally we took the decision that was best for the company, even though it meant some personal sacrifice. So I think the ability to put...
So he had the final vote?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He still has. We had a meeting this afternoon and he was reading me the riot act, so... We can vote for that. So, you know, so anyway, I think, I mean, that's one thing. But also I think the idea of Infosys, the vision, the dream was more important than our individual egos. And I find in most companies and startups, I see a lot of them. I think unless you're willing to subordinate your ego to a larger cause, you will not have sustainability. And I think that was the big thing.
But Kris Gopalakrishnan, I just, everyone chuckled here when I said, does he have the final say or does he have the final vote? But how important is that? Because otherwise you can, for eternity try and build consensus. But really, how important is it that one individual or one founder in that sense then has the casting vote?
So clearly, you have to have a decision-making process. So you need to say, okay, let everybody voice their opinion. And ultimately, when the time comes to make the decision, one person has to make the decision if we can't get consensus. If we can get consensus, well and good, then we go forward. I think the respect for each other and the ability to look at every single transaction from a new beginning, I think it's very important. You may have lost in one transaction, but then in the next transaction you will win because you start from zero again. And that's how we go forward.
Okay. Dinesh, you were smiling when you said, do you vouch for the fact that Mr. Murthy always had the final say? But if I could ask you, and I remember this comment that Mr. Murthy made to me many years ago in an interview, that Infosys was the biggest debating society where everyone had their say, but finally what was good for the company, that was the decision that prevailed. What were some of the biggest disagreements that you've had if you can go back in time?
No, I'll tell you, our own existence, I don't know whether we'd have seen all of you if we had taken a decision in 1989 when Murthy called us for a meeting in Jayanagar office. I hope you remember. Nandan, myself and Raghavan were there. Kris and Shibu were there in US. So things were not going on well, in the business. So we are not seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And there was a proposal Murthy brought in and said, it is available for sale now. So can we sell it off, for $1 million or $2 million? This is 89. We were still a private limited company.
9 years into your existence, about 9 years into your existence.
So, and at that time, because we had a joint venture, it had gone wrong. And earlier to that, we were doing some business with one client. That also did not take off. So now we were at the end of the tunnel. So what do we do? Murthy is asking. So one by one, he started asking us, we debated. Finally, we had to take a decision. So Nandan said, yeah, if that is the only choice we have, we'll close down. Then I also said, we will do that. Raghavan also said, yeah, we'll have to do if that is the only choice. But finally what Murthy said was, no, if you guys are ready to sell off, but I'm ready to buy you guys out. But he knew he had no money to buy. He admitted that later on. Then we all said, if you are the one who called this meeting, if you are ready to sync together, we are ready to sync with you. If you are ready to ship together, we are ready to ship with you. That is how we are seeing it today. So sometimes leaving the decision. When we are all same-minded people, but we are all similar-minded people, not same-minded people. If we were all similar-minded people, same-minded people, I don't think I would have seen you all today. Because we differed with each other. So if there are two people who agree all the time, one of them is not required. And having said that, if there are two people who disagree all the time, both of them are not required.
There's a lot of entrepreneurs here today. The talk, unfortunately, comes down to valuation. The talk comes down to, what is the best price that you can extract for yourself? When should you exit? That's the conversation that we seem to be having around the startup ecosystem at this point in time. What gave you the confidence to hold out in 1989? When you were getting $1 million, things were not looking that great. You were about 8 or 9 years into your existence.
The reason why I was somewhat desirous on continuing was simply the fact that we had run this marathon for 10 years, 1990 or so. And we had gotten used to austerity. We had gotten used to, being away from home. We had gotten used to troubling, our wives and children with asking them to live very frugally. And I said, look, who knows what the future will hold good? Why not take a little bit more of risk and run this marathon? And as luck would have it, 1991 economic reforms happened, and then, of course, there was no turning back. So it was just a question of saying that, look, we have enjoyed each other's company, we have learned from each other, we have learned to accept deferred gratification, we have learned to live in an austere manner, and we are enjoying all of this. So said, why bring this show to an end? That was the idea.
Okay. Shibu, let me ask you, and I'm again going to jog your memory a little bit. I think it was 1995, the summer of 1995, and this was a tough negotiation that you were having with a client at the Taj Residency Hotel in Bangalore. I think at that point in time, this client contributed almost 25% of your revenues, and you had a tough call to make on that negotiating table. Take us through that, because I think there are lessons to be learned here for this room full of entrepreneurs, and maybe Mr. Murthy can chip in as well. But
on that one, I'm going to ask Mr. Murthy to answer.
Do you have another anecdote? Then you want to you want to throw away
something else? Mr. Murthy.
Well, again, we were all together. Shibu was in the U.S. Myself, Nandan, Dinesh, Raghavan, Mohan. Mohan is missing. Then Fanish and Kris. We were all there. And at the end of the 2-day negotiations, we had to give an answer whether we'll continue with the reduced rates or not. So my logic was not that it will not be fair to us, it will not be fair to the customer, because we would not be able to provide them all the benefits in terms of investments in technology, investments in training, etc. So therefore, they were all looking to me to give an answer, and I said, look, we will very respectfully, very courteously hand over all this business to whosoever you choose, even though it's going to be quite a strain for us in terms of financial, in terms of revenues. And that was a decision that I took, simply because I felt that if I had accepted that, then we had to accept lower prices from every other customers, and therefore our growth would slow down, and more importantly, our profitability would slow down. That was...
So Shibu, let me then ask you, now that he's given us this anecdote, but let me ask you about how hard it was, at least in the initial years, to sell the India story, to sell the fact that here was a company and I know Mr. Murthy believed in creating this sort of island of prosperity in the backyard of Bangalore city, but how hard was it for you to sell the India story, especially in the US?
So actually that was very hard. In fact, I think the first client Infosys had outside was DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation. I remember going to the first sales meeting. I was pretty naive at that point in time. I went and I started telling them that, we are from Bangalore, we are from India, and soon I realized that they don't understand where India is. Next time onwards, I used to start out with the world map. I used to tell them that this is the world map, this is India, this is Bangalore, I come from there and I speak English. That was the opening remark which we used to give when we started our...
I speak English.
I speak English, because it was new to them. They were not used to having people from India coming and saying that we will build these systems. So it was a pretty hard thing to do. And everybody whom you used to meet at that time would ask about cows on the road and, things like that. And world changed over a period of time, and today, everybody who meets on the road will ask you, are you a software engineer? So things changed. But it was a very, very difficult and long journey. It required a lot of persistence. See, I wanted to add to some of this conversation. Number one, I think Infosys always believed that ideas are diameters and execution is the key. Mm-hmm. So this is a clear example of execution, right? Whether it is in the 80s or in 90s or in 2000 onwards, it is a clear example of execution. The ability to execute. Always Mr. Murthy used to say strategy is 5% of the time, 95% of the time is execution. And it's a good example of the result of that focus in execution. That is number one. Number two, as Mr. Murthy always used to believe in quality. I remember in 1983, one day night, we woke up one of our clients. 84. We were installing a computer in Maiko right here in Bangalore. And in the middle of the night, so we had worked 10 days without sleep, both of us. And in the middle of the night, on the last day of our testing, in the middle of the night at 1 o'clock, Mr. Murthy found something. Of course, he yelled at me, but then said, we will call the client. 1 o'clock at night, we called the client. He was absolutely unhappy, but he came down and he looked at the error which Mr. Murthy found and said that this is not an error. It was not an error. It was actually a bug in the operating system.
Okay.
So he laughed at us and went back. But next day morning, he came into the department and told me, I still remember, they were all ready to do the testing, acceptance testing. He told his staff, these guys are so good at it, so transparent, so honest, so committed to the quality of this, that we will suspend the testing and accept the system as of right now. So they accepted the system next day morning based on our testing. So the focus on quality, the focus on execution, these are all hallmarks of Infosys success.
Mr. Raghavan, one of the other hallmarks of Infosys has also been not just democratizing entrepreneurship, but also democratizing wealth creation. And I think one of the big things that Infosys did when you launched your ESOP scheme in 1994 and then followed that up was this business of democratizing wealth creation. Take us through what went on in the boardroom at that point in time. What made you want to do this? If I remember correctly, one of your annual reports said that ESOPs gives us a unique positioning, democratizing wealth, and suddenly professionals realized that they could also become wealthy by ethical means in their careers. What was it that drove you to do this?
Before I answer the question, can I give an anecdote?
Please. I'm looking for juicy anecdotes that I don't already have.
Where, for a change, I was in the driver's seat and Murthy was in the back seat.
How often did that happen?
Not often, very rarely. So this was the year 1983. So at the time I was working for Databases Corporation in New York. I got a call from Murthy that we have landed a contract with Myco, now Robert Bosch. So you better come back immediately. We have to set up the office and start the training program, etc. So I came down. We took a small house as our office in Jayanagar, Bangalore. And then we used to go and give training to Myco staff and give them support services. And then at that time, Murthy borrowed a Vespa scooter from his brother-in-law, Srinivas Kulkarni. He was lying in Hubli, he said, I will get it. And I used to drive the Vespa scooter, and he was my pillion driver.
That is a sight. That is a picture we want
Raghavan,
to see.
incidentally, that building now...
No, I will tell you one more. Then one day when we were going, the scooter gave some trouble. We stopped over there. Vikram Bhatt, who was the director commercial at Myco, he stopped us and said, do you want a lift? Then we said, no, this is high time. We get a car. Even then, our middle class frugality came in the way. We didn't buy a car. We leased a car with a driver. It's an ambassador car. Okay, now coming back to the ESOP schemes, I think that was it was an occasion when we realized that there is a lot of HR issues where there is a lot of competition for good professionals, and there has to be a way of retaining these people in the long term and also make them part owners of the company. So fortunately for us, the government had not thought of ESOP schemes at that point in time, and so we came up with the concept. The only big debate I remember we used to have, so Murthy being having a weakness for very smart, brilliant people, he wanted a certain percentage of the shares to go to the very bright people who are the anchors. But my view was I was more egalitarian kind of an approach, where I said 50% of the people at Infosys are the sheet anchors or the foundation on which we are building all this. They also, albeit a small amount of shares, they also should get some benefit out of the ESOP system. So this is how we discussed, and ultimately we agreed on a point where a chairman's quota was handled completely by him, and the other one, based on the number of people, how many years of service they put in, gradually we built the system so that everybody gets ESOP at some point of time, including the drivers.
How important was this for you, sir?
I think it's very important because, having come up in a lower middle class family, having lived a fairly frugal life. For us, the joy was seeing others also enjoy with us. So therefore, I think for us, creating an experiment in democratization of wealth was a very important one. There was not one person amongst the founders. I mean, Ashok is not here, the seventh one, but at that time he was not there. Everybody was very enthusiastic in sharing wealth with younger people. And of course, Mohan is not here. Mohan was, in some sense, architect of the technicalities of the stock option plan. But everybody bought into it because that was their basic belief.
Yeah.
Shirin, can I add?
Yes.
Murthy was a hardcore communist in his youth.
Yes, I remember. Till you went to jail somewhere. Where was that, Mr. Murthy?
I wouldn't call it jail. I was incarcerated in a place called Niš, which is a border town between what was then Yugoslavia and now Serbia and Bulgaria.
And that's when you decided that capitalism was the way to go.
Yeah.
Shirin,
Yes.
can I add on
Please.
the ESOP? Even before the ESOP, I still remember an incident in 1985 or 84 or 85. I was in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Murthy is in India, Murthy and Raghavan and others. So I get a call from there saying, Dinesh, we are redistributing the shares, and you, Shibu and Arora are going to get the 3% more than what you have today. So then I didn't question anything. I said, that is fine. And then later on I found out that where from that 3% for each one of us has come from. So it was Raghavan and Murthy who had given up their 9% together to make us richer. Today otherwise we would have been Shibu, me, and would not have been billionaires. So that is the kind of trust, we didn't ask for, but on their own, showing their fairness, they did that. That's very important among the founders, and that has translated into many other employees also later on.
Nandan, I want to get you to jog your memory back to another turning point, and that's the NASDAQ listing of the company. And I remember you telling me that for you perhaps has been one of the most satisfying moments of your time at Infosys. Why?
No, I think that was the first time any Indian company had listed in the US market. And, you had to deal with a lot of pioneering issues, dealing with SEC regulations, Indian accounting, US accounting, and, selling this vision to global investors. So I think it was really a turning point, and Murthy was there in New York, I was there in Bangalore, all of us were in different locations, and I think that was really a great point, because in some sense we are planting the Indian flag in Times Square. So that was a big event for us.
But what were the nerves like at that point?
Well, I think, I think the sight of the issue happening and then the stock price slowly ticking up in that few minutes. And Murthy was sitting on the chair, very uncomfortable, I could see that.
You remember that moment, Mr. Murthy?
Well, I remember another very telling event, and that was, I had to make the first presentation on Monday morning, and Sunday night, I had excruciating tooth pain, and I just didn't know what to do. So there are two things that I could have done. One was to decide to go to the dentist next morning, and I didn't know, first of all, how much he would charge, whether I had money, whether we had time, etc. So you know what I did? With a lot of bravery, I just pulled the tooth out.
You pulled the tooth out?
This was something, because, I had the fear I may lose my sight or something, or my hearing, because that's what I had heard from many people. But I said, look, if I have to participate next morning at 8 o'clock, and that was the bravest thing that I have ever done.
one more thing on the NASDAQ.
Yes.
You know, I think Murthy remembers this very well. The amount of fairness he has, even for investors, you know, this example brings out. On the NASDAQ floor, we have made the book building, and everyone was saying that we should offer the shares at about $40 or $45, $38. But Murthy was asked what is the first thing that we have to offer. And he said, let it go at 34. They were all stunned. Whereas most of the people that, you know, in the NASDAQ market would say, let it go to 50 is what they demand. But then later on when he was asked, why did you say that your $34 you were saying you're ready to offer? He says, even the first guy who wants to buy from me, from us, which is going from the founders, he has to make the money. So let me be fair to him. So, but the first ring that came was $50.
Kris Gopalakrishnan, you know, over the years, we've spoken with each one of you quarter after quarter, talking to you about your quarterly results. And one thing which is sort of, you know, folklore on Dalal Street is that Infosys has always been conservative. It's always been cautious as far as its guidance is concerned. So, you know, under promise, over deliver has always been the Infosys style. And that's very, very different from the style that we see today. I mean, people will talk about billion-dollar valuations, whether or not they have the billion-dollar valuation or not. What made you want to adopt that approach as far as business was concerned from the get-go?
You know, first of all, it's part of the middle class values, under promise and over deliver. Second, it's always, you know, good to make sure that you achieve whatever you promise, and that builds trust. And building trust is all about, you know, running a business is all about building trust with all the stakeholders. And the stakeholders will trust you.
But you ever feel that maybe it reined in your risk-taking ability? People have always questioned whether Infosys was aggressive enough, acquisitorial enough. No. You know, do you believe that it ever reined in your risk-taking ability?
No. So we use data to come out with our estimates, our forecasts and things like that. And we always say that, you know, whatever the numbers tell you, that's what we... What we have not done is to say that let's be aggressive in those numbers. So it's just that we look at all the pluses and minuses. We look at you know, what is possible, what is not possible, and come out with our estimates based on a projection.
I think $40 billion not a bad market cap for a bunch of risk-averse guys.
No, not at all.
Yes, I just want to point out that, you know, the number of firsts which Infosys has done is quite a lot.
Yes.
Right? It's the first to build a campus, first to have the employee stock option plan, first to be listed on NASDAQ, first to get CMM level 4, then to get CMM level 5. So for a risky, you know, so-called risk-averse
and ball rate 600 points also.
Right. You know, we have been pretty aggressive in actually executing what we wanted to do. So I think, as Kris said, you know, and we always, and Mr. Murthy always used to say, we trust in God, rest of us bring data.
Data, yeah, so, I remember that.
Right. From that, you come to conclusions, and those are the conclusions which drive the business. As an organization, I believe that we have been, Infosys has been extremely aggressive in doing things which others have not done before. And I think that is what created the performance.
You know, Mr. Murthy, I remember you telling me, and Mr. Raghavan, maybe you'll give me some anecdotes on that. You always maintain that if there's bad news, it should take the elevator. If it's good news, it should take the stairs. And that's something that you've always maintained. Any instance, Mr. Raghavan, that you remember where there was bad news that you had to share with either investors, shareholders, employees? Any anecdotes that come to your mind on a tough decision that had to be communicated? Shibu has one.
I think in 2003, you know, we were, I think in 2001, we were growing at the rate of probably 40-50%. And then you had the internet bubble burst. And Infosys was the first one in the result announcement sequence, and we had to say that our growth rate will come down from 50% to 20%. Huge drop. And we were the first organization to come out and say it. And we saw the internet bubble burst, and we had to go out and give a guidance. We clearly guided saying that our growth rates are going to come down by almost 50%. of course, everyone reacted, but that
The
that
stock
was the
market, our price came down by 40%.
40%.
Let me give you another example. In 1995, we decided to open our own office in Boston. Mr. Devdutt Elurkar was to go and start it. And we had set apart some money. Fortunately, because it was after economic reforms, it was easy to open the office. But then, even then, it took a little bit of time, about almost a year. So then we said, why don't we put it in the stock market, secondary market, and get some good returns? And of course, we lost most of the money. Then there was a big discussion in the internal board whether we should disclose or not. Some of the fellows said, no, there is no need to disclose this, etc., etc. But then I think it was Nandan and I who said, look, disclosure of is not only for good news. Disclosure means you are bringing bad news early and proactively. So Nandan and I, we went to Bombay and we told the investors saying that, look, we have lost this. Next time we won't invest it in secondary market and we'll make it up this way. So, so many people had told us the stock price would go down, this will happen, that will happen. Frankly, that was the first time we found that the stock price went up. That people said, here is a set of people who are honest. They may not be very smart, but they are honest. So they said we should in some way excuse their indiscretion and then perhaps in some way encourage them. So that's what happened.
These unwritten rules that Infosys has had, that your children would not be part of the company, that you would all step away from the company. Was there a lot of debate and discussion when you arrived at those unwritten rules and that unwritten code?
No, I don't think so, because, see, we were middle-class professionals trying to become entrepreneurs in an era when business was either family companies or government-owned companies or multinationals. So we are creating a new paradigm of first-generation entrepreneurs. So it is very important for us to set a set of rules which could then be emulated by other people. And we also felt that if we are serious about it, then we must at some point transition the company to completely professional management and get the hell out of the way, which is what we have done now. So we kept that promise that we would at the right time get out of the way. I don't think there are many people who have completely stepped out of management and let professionals run it without even
That's why I said
back.
it's a very, very unusual thing.
It's very difficult to do because, you can spend, and the guys...
How hard was it for you?
Well, in my case, thanks
You left much earlier.
Thanks to my colleagues, the generosity, they let me go and do some crazy project. So it was not, so I had that. But I think for someone like Murthy who gave his life and soul, it was a very difficult decision. But I think the fact is we believe that we have to transition to multi-generational leadership of a new kind. And we kept on that commitment.
Kris, how hard was it for you?
Well, the first day after you step down and first week, it's difficult. Over time, it sets, it settles down. But the way you overcome that is you find new things to do and new passions, and you create a new circle, new goals, and you proceed. I think it's something that we knew from 1981, right? So
from the start?
From the start, we said, we will have retirement rules and things like that. So we knew that this is going to happen at some point of time. And in some cases, you prepare yourself and then go forward.
No separation anxiety, Mr. Murthy?
No, I think, as I have often said this, leaving Infosys was almost like giving your daughter away in marriage. It is both a sad occasion because you have brought the child up, all of that. And at the same time, it is a very happy occasion because she has chosen to lead the rest of her life with somebody who is smart, young, who they have a joint
and
dream
of your choice.
And all of that. No, no, not much. Her choice. Her choice.
Your choice, sir.
So therefore we all come to terms with it. But you know, I mean, as long as things go well, everybody is very happy, everybody is satisfied. So fortunately for us, so far things have been good. So
How closely do each one of you look at what's happening at Infosys today? Shibu, do you monitor it weekly, daily, quarterly?
No, I don't think any one of us had a tendency to look at share price. That was not in
the
our
share
culture.
price, but what's going on? What's Vishal up to? What is he doing? Who's he talking to?
I think today we are literally shareholders, right? And I think it's important that we look at only one thing. But that is not something which we do, so we don't. I don't.
Mr. Raghavan?
See, when I left Infosys, I had this idea of supporting entrepreneurship in various ways. I set up the NS Raghavan Center for Entrepreneurial Learning at IIM Bangalore. We have about 54 incubatees. Some of them were very, very successful. My own family company, Nandan Holdings and Investments, 23 odd companies, startups we have supported. So I think those kind of things are very exciting and interesting, helping out others to start their journey in entrepreneurship and help them out.
One of the other very important lessons, and I have to thank Nandan for this piece of advice, or at least learning. And I remember this was an interview that I did with him many, many years ago. And he said, our trip was to build a company that would last. Our trip was to build a company that would be respected. Our trip was never to make money. And Nandan, each one of you has exemplified that, not just when you were at the company and running the company, but also outside of the company in the way that you're now sharing your wealth or giving back to society. That's been an incredible part of the Infosys story as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think the money was a byproduct of all this stuff. And I think that's why every one of us is doing so much philanthropy and support, because at the end of the day, the money is being made to give it back.
The money is being made to give it back. So let me start by getting wrap-up comments. And Dinesh, let me start by asking you, as you look at this room full of young entrepreneurs today, company life cycles are shrinking, product life cycles are shrinking, technology is changing every day. What would your advice be? How do you build sustainable, profitable, companies today?
I go back to the ABCDs of my entrepreneurship. It's so easy for you to remember. A stands for be adventurous and be ambitious. Don't give up those two. It's very important. Adventure means you have to take risks. Not always calculated risks, but sometimes you take bigger risks. Then B is be yourself, believe in yourself, believe in your journey. Nobody else will believe. C is you have to build character, as Murthy has said. Character can be lost overnight, but character needs to be built. It can't be built overnight. It has to be built day by day over a period of time. C also stands for the courage. You need to have a lot of courage to face many odds that will come in against you. D is you have to dream big. Who can dream the most? One Kannada poet said this. I'll tell that in Kannada quickly. So he said, Ravi Kanadinna Kavi Kanda. It means what the sun could not see, the poet saw. But the same poet also said, I'm only a human being, I can only imagine so much. Then the poet said, Kavi Kanadinna Kuduka Kanda. It means what the poet could not see, the drunkard saw. I don't drink. So, but if you want to, if you want to dream big. Don't be a conjuice in dreaming, dream big. It doesn't cost you much. And E is, as Shibu said clearly, execute but not ordinarily, excellently.
Thank you very much for sharing the ABCDE.
He's going to give the Prime Minister competition in the acronym business.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. Between Mr. Murthy and Dinesh, the Prime Minister certainly has competition. Kris, you want to try your luck at that?
I think you have been listening to a lot of advices. I think my advice to you is don't listen to advice. Do what you want to do because you're going to change the world anyway, right? That's what you want to do. So don't listen to anybody. Just do what you want.
But how do you see the world changing, Kris Gopalakrishnan? You're doing this wonderful effort with Itihas and the lessons that you've learned over the years of how this industry has been built. But as you look into the future, what do you see for the future for this industry?
The rules are all changing, right? The old rules don't matter. New rules are being created, new rules are being written, and technology is changing quite rapidly. our ambitions were very different. Their ambitions are going to be different. That's the reason why I say, yes, basic things like profitability, build for long term, etc., etc. But ultimately, you do what you want. I think you have to create your own dream and pursue that, and don't listen to anybody.
Nandan, who are you listening to these days? Or you're not listening to anyone, you're doing what your heart says. What does your heart tell you today? Politics, back to politics? what is it telling
It's
you?
very complicated. It's been a long time.
Is that your Facebook status as well? It's complicated, is it?
Yeah, but I think, I've been, I was actually out of the entrepreneurship space when I was doing this Aadhaar stuff because I was too busy combating the system to get things done. But when I came back, I realized that India was on a new verge of explosion, and I'm very excited by it. I wish I was 25 years old again. And I think when I meet young entrepreneurs, today I had a demo by Vijay, and I feel so good. So I think I find the energy of these young guys, their dreams, their ambitions are fantastic. And I think we should do everything to support them to achieve that.
Well, Mr. Raghavan?
I would like to talk about what Professor Saras Saraswati, who is the chair professor at IIM Bangalore, is a visiting faculty. She came out with the concept of effectual entrepreneurship. She found out of the top 100 companies in the US, that's a research publication. So people did not, all the successful ones, they did not start off with a big shot idea and followed it up. They started with an idea, developed it a little bit, and found it was not working, changed it a bit, and changed it again. And they went on changing it. And sometimes the animal was very different from where they started. So they have been very extremely successful. My advice to all the budding startups is, don't worry that what you thought was the good idea should always be followed with rigor. You can keep on changing the contours of what your thoughts, so that you keep developing it and find out how the market is perceiving it, and keep changing it. Go with that, and go with your gut, that this is what I think is likely to work out and not my original idea. And that you are likely to be more successful with that.
Shibu?
I think while Kris said that everything changes, it is true that everything is changing, technology is changing, the environment is changing. I think the value system which you need to hold on is very, very important. I think one of the big successes of Infosys is it's holding on to the ethics and the values on which it was created. Whether it is about transparency, fairness, honesty, customer focus, excellence in execution. Those kinds of values, I believe, are time invariant. And that is applicable to any situation with this technology or that technology. So that is extremely important. And many startups, because they are in a hurry, sometimes don't think through these principles. And that in turn leads to their breaking up. I think one of the reasons I believe that we didn't break up also was we had these rules of engagement in place early on.
Yeah.
We believed, we agreed that we will not use corporate resources for personal use. We will not, violate the basic values and ethics. And I think that gave us the foundation on which we could stay together, apart from all the personalities. And that is very important to the startups, because unless they stay together, they cannot execute and succeed. And to stay together, they need these basic principles in place. These are very simple principles, but they need them in place.
Mr. Murthy?
Well, I think, first of all, it's an absolute pleasure to be amongst the people who are going to build India of this century. You are at an extraordinary time in the history of this country. For the first time in the last 400 years, the world thinks something positive of India. They expect India to lead in many ways. Therefore, you are entrepreneurs at a very, very important time in the history of the country. You have opportunity to create jobs and make the country better. You have venture capital, anyway, you have access to venture capital. Talent is building up. There is considerable respect for India. Therefore, I would request every one of you to ask a very simple question in everything that you do, and that is, will this action of mine lead to better respect for my company if that has to have impact on the outside world, and will enhance respect for me if it has to have impact only on the inside? Therefore, look for respect from the society and the rest will all follow. Money will come, you will scale up, you will do everything right. Therefore, in every decision, please look for respect.
Well, Mr. Murthy, Mr. Raghavan, Shibu, Nandan Nilekani, Kris Gopalakrishnan, Dinesh, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time that the founders of Infosys are together on a public platform in a decade. So thank you so much. This has been an absolutely wonderful evening. Thank you very much for joining us here. Big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.